Today we're going to learn how to write and solve a proportion. There's a couple of ways to write a proportion, and the first way is a table, and the second way is what I call a cheat sheet. And I think when you look at them, you're going to find that they're very similar. So I'm going to go ahead and write this down, and then you can pause the video and write it down as well. Alright, so here are the ways to write a proportion. The first way is the table, and you're going to organize the information in a table. Then you use the columns or the rows to write the proportion. And it doesn't matter if you use columns or rows, and when we look at our first example, you will see that. The second way to write a proportion is what I call a cheat sheet, and how you do that is you write the labels to the side, make sure the information from the problem is put into the correct spot according to the cheat sheet. I have found just from past experience that you need a way to organize your data when you are writing a proportion. Otherwise, it's easy to get the numbers in the wrong spot. If you get the numbers in the wrong spot, then your proportion will be incorrect. So let's look at our first example so you can see the two different ways to write a proportion. Example 1 says, a chef increases the amount of ingredients in a recipe to make a proportional recipe. The new recipe has 6 cups of black beans. Write and solve a proportion that gives the number X of tomatoes in the new recipe. Alright, so the first way that we're going to do this is we're going to do using the table. And so we have black beans. And then we have tomatoes. And then we have the recipe that's over here to the left. And then we have our new recipe. So if we look at our recipe, it says that we use 1.5 cups black beans. So my 1.5 is going to go where black beans are. And then I use 1 tomato. Then if I look at my problem, it says that the new recipe has 6 cups of black beans, so I'm making my recipe bigger, and then I don't know how many tomatoes I need to use, so that's my question mark. So now I can use either the rows, so this would be the rows, or the columns to write my proportion. So if I have 1.5 black beans, I'm going to use the columns first, to 1. That's the same as 6 black beans to however many tomatoes. Cross the equal sign and multiply. Cross the equal sign and multiply. And then I'm going to divide 6 by 1.5. When I work that out on my calculator, I get 4 tomatoes. Alright, so now let's do the same thing using rows. And if I do it rows, then it's going to go this way. So I have 1.5 to 6 is the same as 1 to x. Cross the equal sign and multiply. Cross the equal sign and multiply, and you can see I'm going to get the same answer. Okay, so it doesn't matter if I use rows or columns, and there's organizing the information using a table. Now let's try it the second way, the way that I call a cheat sheet, and you're going to see that it's very, very similar. It's just you don't have all the extra lines. So my labels are black beans and tomatoes, and just like before, I have 1.5 cups to 1 tomato, and then my new recipe is 6 cups of black beans. So this is where I need to be careful that I get it in the right spot. So black beans is on top, so 6 is on top, and then tomatoes is what I don't know. And you can see it's the same proportion as this one right here. Cross the equal sign and multiply, cross the equal sign and multiply, and I get x equals 4 tomatoes. So I don't care which way you use. I don't care if you use the table. I don't care if you use the cheat sheet. I usually use the cheat sheet only because it's pretty much the same thing. You just don't have to draw a table. So it's up to you to choose on the way that makes the most sense to you. So you have a couple of on your own problems to do. The first on your own problem says, from example 1, write and solve a proportion that gives the amount of water in the new recipe. Use a table, so it tells you that you're going to use a table to organize your information. So go ahead and pause the video and work that problem out, and then you can come back and check your answer. Alright, so you can see I've already set my table up. I have black beans and water, then I have my current recipe, and then I have my new recipe. So from the recipe on example 1, I know that I have 1.5 cups of black beans to 2 cups of water. Then I have, for my new recipe, I'm increasing it to 6, and then water is what I'm trying to find. So I'm going to set that up, 1.5 to 2, and I usually use columns. It just makes the most sense to me. And then I have 6 to W, but if rows make sense to you, that is fine too. It works the same way. Cross the equal sign and multiply. Cross the equal sign and multiply. So I have 1.5 W equals 12. I'm going to divide both sides by 1.5. When I work that out on my calculator, I get water is 8 cups. So for my new recipe, I need 8 cups of water. Alright, then on your own, part 2, hopefully you've already done that one. It says write and solve a proportion that gives the amount of salsa needed in the new recipe. So I'm going to use the cheat sheet, black beans to salsa. And I know that black beans is 1.5, and then when I look at the recipe, the salsa is 0.5 cups. Alright, and then I'm making I need 6 cups of black beans for my new recipe, and then salsa is what I'm trying to find, and so that goes on the bottom. Cross the equal sign and multiply. Cross the equal sign and multiply. 6 times 0.5 is 3. I'm going to divide both sides by 1.5 on my calculator, and when I do that, 3 divided by 1.5 is 2 cups of salsa. Alright, then the reflection piece says what I said earlier. It is easy to write ratios incorrectly. Try to get in the habit of using either a table or a cheat sheet to organize the information. Which way makes the most sense to you and why? I'm not going to write anything here. That is a reflection piece for you to help you make sense of what we have just learned. So think about if the table makes the most sense to you or if the cheat sheet makes the most sense to you, and think about why. If you want to jot down some of your thoughts, that would be great. Example 2 says write and solve proportions, and then we're supposed to solve the proportion 3 to 2 equals x to 8, so we're supposed to find what x is. I'm going to work this one 2 different ways. I don't expect you to always work everything 2 different ways, but it's good sometimes just to see different ways. You may use one way one time and another way at a different time, so it's just kind of whatever works best for you. So the first way, when I solve this proportion, I'm going to use equivalent fractions, and you'll see what that means in just a second. So when I look at this, I know that 2 times 4 is 8, so 3 times 4, I'm going to write this bigger so I can work. So 2 times 4 is 8. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So 3 times 4 is 12. So x equals 12. Alright, then the second way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it with the cross product property. So I have 3 to 2 equals something to 8. Cross the equal sign and multiply. 2 times x is 2x. Cross that equal sign and multiply. 3 times 8 is 24. When I solve for x, x equals 12. So it doesn't matter if I use equivalent fractions or if I use the cross product property, I get the same answer. And I use both different times. When it's easy to see that 2 times 4 is 8, what do I do to the top? Then I will do equivalent fractions. Sometimes it's not always that easy, and then I use the cross product property. So my next example is 5 to 8 equals 20 to d. This is one where I'm going to use the cross product property. I know that 5 times 4 is 20, so 8 times 4 is 32. So d is 32. That's one where I don't need to use the cross product property. If multiplication is hard for you, then you may just want to stick with the cross product property. Number 2, let's see, 7 times 2 is 14. So something times 2 is 10. So 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, that's almost easier to think of as dividing. 14 divided by 2 is 7, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So again, if that doesn't make sense to you, use the cross product property. Alright, let's look at the last one. 21 is to 24 equals x is to 8. So I know 24 divided by 3 is 8. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So x equals 7. So on this one, this isn't any where I had to use the cross product property. Notice how I tried to show my work by kind of showing my thought process. I multiplied by 4 in the first one, divided by 2 in the second one, divided by 3 in the third one. So when it says to show your work, you can just do little things like that to help me know that you know what you're doing. Alright, let's look at our last example, and then we will be done with our lesson. It says a school has 950 students. The ratio of female students to all students is 48 to 95. Write and solve a proportion to find the number of students who are female. Alright, so I have female, here's my ratio, female to all. So that's my cheat sheet or my table, depending on which you prefer. And then 48 female to 95 total. And then I see that there is 950 students in the school. So 950 students is my total or my all, so it's going to go on the bottom. And I'm trying to find my female students. So there is my proportion. Notice how my cheat sheet helped me make sure that I get all my numbers in the right spot. I'm going to cross the equal sign and multiply. So I have 95F. I'm going to cross the equal sign and multiply. 48 times 950 is 45,600. Divide both sides by 95, and I get 480. So there, the 480 students out of the 950 total are female. And we'll write it out for Miss Bernowski and Miss Bonders. So that makes sense. When I was working this, it jumped out at me that 95 times 10 is 950, and then 48 times 10 is 480. So I really didn't need to use the cross product property, but I had already started, so I just finished it. That is the end of our lesson. If anything does not make sense, please come see me in the morning.